the least racist person.
Are you bigoted in any way?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Islamophobic?
I'm a person, no, not at all.
When people say that you're racist or homophobic or Islamophobic or whatever it is, that has to bother you, or compare you to Hitler. There are newspaper covers that compare. Does that bother you?
No, if things are true, if that were true, it would bother me tremendously, okay? But of course, if you're a racist, you probably wouldn't care. But if things are true, it would bother me. But if it's so false, and honestly, I don't hear it often.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining us on the Malzberg panel, Elura Nanos. She is an attorney and author of How to Talk to Your Lawyer. And Adam, you say, what is on this bill? And Adam Thompson, senior partner with the law offices of Adam M. Thompson and syndicated talk host. And I got to tell you, Adam was in rare form. He did such a great job at the Walking Dead convention in New Jersey over the weekend, where he was very gracious to me and my son. It was a wonderful experience, so thank you for that, Adam. But let's move on, and let's talk, let's have Laura weigh in first. So what do you make of Donald Trump?
I feel like Donald Trump is like the slave owner that really believes that the slaves love him. You know, like he's like delusional about what people think about him.
But here's the problem with that, Elura. I know I asked you, but here's the problem. A plurality of Americans agree with him on his proposal for Muslims. A majority of Republicans, an overwhelming majority, agree with him.
I understand that.
51% of independents agree with him. So are they all slave owners and bigots and racists?
No. I didn't mean that. What I'm saying though is that Donald Trump, he makes these grand statements, and he makes these outrageous claims and ideas that I think at first blush a lot of people just automatically agree with him because he's really striking a nerve. But I think that if you really take time to think about what's legal, what makes sense as a long-term solution to things, at that point, that's where everything Donald Trump says just falls apart. So I think he's great at hooking people in the same way that advertisements are great at hooking
Adam,
people.
what about it?
I really don't have a problem with Trump, because I think Trump really just speaks from his heart and speaks unscripted off the cuff, and he's resonating with voters and a vast majority of the people around this country, certainly from the conservative and the Republican wing, because what he's saying is connecting with them. Now, a lot of people have a problem because sometimes he does seem to go too far across a certain line, but the bottom line is at least he stands by what he says because he actually believes what he says.
Right.
It's a lot better than reading a teleprompter and not really meaning or agreeing what's on the board, but you'll say it because you think it'll trigger you getting votes.
I think that's exactly right, and the thing is, he believes what he says, and he's not constrained by logic or practicality or law or anything.
Well, there's nothing illegal about what he's suggesting. It's in the U.S. Code of Law. It's been addressed in the Supreme Court. Previous presidents have done it. It's not unconstitutional, so there's no problem with the law. But I want to ask you something about that might be problematic with the law. From a president who has broken the law and spit on the Constitution over and over and over again, and that would be with respect to gun sales. People have talked about this, and now there's more reports that Obama's going to actually do this. There's an AP story that his advisors are working on this executive order where he would order mandatory background checks circumventing Congress, which is what he does best. And the Supreme Court has ruled against him and his administration, by the way, 14 times unanimously, and lower courts have ruled against his other executive orders on immigration and others. So, Elura, do you have a problem with him issuing that kind of order?
I don't have a problem with him issuing it. I think it's about time something like that gets done. Congress isn't going to do it, so somebody's got to step in.
So the Constitution, you talked about law before and Constitution. So the Constitution and everything else be damned because the elected officials or the people figure the people they represent don't want it. They don't vote for it. So, well, they won't vote for it, then the king will do it. Right, Adam?
Hey, 30 seconds ago she was blasting Trump because he circumvents things in the Constitution for refugees that don't even have constitutional rights. But yet here we are as citizens having a Second Amendment right to bear arms, and a president trying to circumvent Congress to do an executive order that's illegal and unlawful. And if he does, it will be challenged and will be overturned if it goes to court. So why he's doing this, I know, because he wants to appeal to the public pressure that's out there for everything going on with the gun violence. But you don't do it the way that he's doing it. Let Congress take a vote on it. That's why we elect those representatives to make law.
Right.
He's the executive branch,
Go ahead, Elura.
not the lawmaking branch.
Elura, go ahead, respond.
Look, I think it's really convenient to say, well, we have the Second Amendment, and to think of it as something that is just unbridled, that there's no qualification whatsoever. But the truth is, with all the amendments, there's a right to regulate, and I see this as regulation. I don't see a problem with it. And
oh, well, then next, I'm sure, Elura, you won't see a problem with putting in jail anybody who speaks disparagingly, quote unquote, about Muslims, because, you know, Congress won't address it, so I guess the president should sign an executive order on that,
why
too.
don't we just regulate
We're coming back. We're coming back, Adam. More of the panel. Don't go away.
Doing what I did was me saying I am like, I don't know, Jason Bourne. So I had this fantastic idea that I was going to prove to the world that, you know, I was the real thing. You know, I could be, you know, I could be what it is that all those guys out there who go to the movies and watch those movies, they all want to be that. But I wanted to prove that I was that.
All right, that's a very sick man who put a lot of lives not only in danger, but who was responsible for our soldiers being killed as they searched for the deserter known as Bo Bergdahl. And now he's done this podcast interview with somebody here, and all he wanted to do was be a whistleblower. So he was going to leave his base and walk all the way 18 miles to a bigger base so he could make a point and get there and squeal on how ineffective and to terribly run the base he was at was being run. I mean, I got to tell you, and welcome back to Elura Nanos and Adam Thompson on the panel. You're both lawyers. Adam, I mean, this guy's facing court-martial. I can only hope he winds up in jail for a long time. Why on earth would you, if you're his attorney, would you let him do this cockamamie podcast?
I would never let him do this podcast. As a criminal defense lawyer for 25 years, I don't ever let my clients give statements, and rarely, if ever, do they even testify at a trial. So here's this guy giving an entire statement over the course of a podcast that's how many hours long, who knows. All of that will now be fodder to be used at trial if he was to testify, and it also allows them to now investigate information that he says on those statements to use against him as well.
Right.
Complete disaster that he would do this. I don't know what he's thinking or his lawyer's thinking, but it never should have happened.
Elura?
Adam's totally right. I mean, defendants, you never have a criminal defendant make so much as a 2-minute speech, much less an hours-long podcast. You don't know what they're going to say or how it's going to be taken or what's going to happen from it. Yeah, absolutely. And I only hope Adam's right when it comes to this all being used as evidence against him. I have a feeling the fix is in, and they're going to give this guy a big slap on the wrist and say he suffered enough for serving, being a prisoner for however many years. Don't get me started with the prisoners that we released, the terrorists that we released. Now there are reports that Obama misled the public about just how bad they were. And now we have reports also of a recently released in 2012 Gitmo prisoner who's now a big al-Qaeda leader once again. So Obama, you keep it up. You sign those executive orders like guns are the problem, and you keep releasing these murderous terrorists into society, and we're in big trouble. Okay, now, you're both criminal lawyers, and not a lot of attention being paid to this first case in Baltimore, the Freddie Gray trial, the first police officer. And what happened was they claimed that this was the guy who drove the van, the cop. And they claimed that he should have known that, first of all, he should have buckled the guy in, and he should have known that he needed help. But the autopsy said as much. But they presented a really top forensic expert and a law enforcement police chief from another city to say that the forensic expert, Adam, said that he broke his neck. Once the injury occurred, this guy wouldn't have been able to speak. So the fact that Freddie Gray told the cop, I need help or something, he didn't have that injury. He didn't have a life-threatening injury. He didn't have a broken neck at that point. So there was no reason to suspect that he was in danger for his life. How damaging is this going to be to the prosecution?
It'll hurt them, but in the big picture, Steve, you got to remember, how does he even get in this position to begin with? If the prosecution does the presentation the right way, they're going to lead the jury down the path of saying there's a certain protocol that's in place every time we arrest a prisoner. When you put him in the van, this is the proper way to do it, where it's not negligent or harmful or dangerous to the prisoner being transported. And how do you handcuff them? How do you buckle them in? All those things are protocol.
But Elura, they testified that he was never instructed at the police academy. It is not procedure. He made 200 arrests. He had never buckled anybody into that kind of a van before.
Yeah, so I think it's actually all how that gets spun. Because on one hand, you know, the story could be that, you know, the entire procedure is negligent, the entire procedure or the entire, you know, just the way that this is always handled is in a way that's likely to bring about injury or is very dangerous. On the other hand, it could be looked at like, hey, this is never done because there's not usually a need for it. So I think it really depends on what the prosecution's theory is. Are they trying to get the jury to believe that the police department in total just has such bad policies inherently that this is something like this is bound to happen?
That's different than convicting this guy on the charges. I gotta go. I gotta end it there. We're gonna have plenty more on this trial and the other officers in the Baltimore trial as well. Thank you both. I appreciate it. Give Me 5 is next, folks. But tomorrow, another edition of America Talks Live. It's at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, right here, hosted by me, and for a chance for me to speak with you. So we'll be taking your video messages. You can do those today. Look at the screen. All you have to do is log on to newsmaxusa.com. Make the video, and maybe we'll play it on the show. You could also call me tomorrow and start before the show. Start at about 10 to 4, quarter to 4 Eastern Time on Friday, 877-NEWSMAX. 877-NEWSMAX. I look forward to talking with you tomorrow live on the air. Don't go away.